Welcome to wesleygospel.com. I'm going to go over um, my latest section that I got through on Getting On in the World by William Matthews, published 1879 during the Little House on the Prairie time period. And this was printed 70,000 times, um, which was considered very good during that time period for book publishing. Um, all of the chapters in this book were originally published through the Chicago Tribune before they were collected. So these basically are really long-winded newspaper articles for the Chicago Tribune, and then they were turned into chapters and collected into this book. Um, so this was clearly the top success manual, and the full title of this book um, was called Getting On in the World, or Hints on Success in Life. And it's mainly targeted at young men who are entering upon um, self-employment, starting their own businesses. Very little of the view expressed here is that very little of it is with the perspective of being an employee at a company. It's more so based at instilling good habits and attitudes in people that make their way in the world uh, through starting their own independent form of money generation, whether it be um, being a military leader. Now, granted, that's an employee of the government. Whether it would be a writer, see, that's really independent. So you become an author, you become a writer. You're not an employee there. You know, you sell your manuscripts to a publisher, but you're not an employee of the publisher like a company employs an employee. See, and so he goes on and he talks about lawyers, for example, lawyers starting their own law firm, um, and so on. So the idea is that success was not being a wage slave. Success was starting your own business and carving out that pathway for yourself and making sure that you had all your ducks in a row in terms of attitudes, in terms of habits, in terms of manners, to make sure that these things were in line to be able to make you pull off things that were otherwise very difficult or impossible for other people. See, because the masses don't experience success. The idea is that the masses are down there. Successful people, aka the rags to riches people, they're self-made men. They are people that they're self-employed. They start their own business. They take risks that other people don't take. Um, I've gotten almost 75% through this book, and he's clearly reverted back to more of a mainstream Wesleyan point of view. So he's quoting references, still plenty of references to military history or the history of literature writers, but he's still quoting Adam Clarke. He's still referring to Adam Clarke and John Wesley, and refers to Adam Clarke as the great Wesleyan commentator. So earlier when I said that it's half New Thought and half evangelical Methodist, I still hold to that. Um, he he's still got this Puritan Methodist view of providence mixed in there, calling mixed in there, diligence mixed in there. It's 1879. So yeah, he's writing for the Chicago Tribune, and that explains the lack of Bible verses. But that doesn't mean that he's not still moving in that tradition, albeit he's liberalizing his quotations and his references. He's still in that Puritan, aka Methodist, way of looking at business activity, and it's faith-based. So the section I'm going to go over is chapter 11 to chapter 15. All right. And the subjects dealt with are manners, business habits, self-advertising, and perseverance, or what you could call bulldog determination, hard work, and diligence. Uh, so what's he got going here? Well, again, he doesn't quote Bible verses to support the attitudes because he's writing for a newspaper. Newspapers aren't going to have you quote Bible verses all the time. It's too mainstream, right? So I found some verses anyway that support the themes he's talking about. In the first chapter, he talks about the golden rule, which is supported by Matthew 22, verse 39. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's the second greatest commandment, second to loving God with all of your heart. The golden rule, aka kindness, is one of the primary attitudes that a businessman needs to have, not only towards employees, coworkers, but also towards customers. It's going to sour the mouths of customers if you have a bad attitude. They're gonna be like, dude, that guy's a jerk. I'm not going back there again, right? The same thing is dealt with in Richard Steele's Religious Tradesman, Chapter 5. Same thing is dealt with in Complete English Tradesman, Chapter 15. Just being nice to people when you're in your business place. Well, people will want to do business with you if you're a nice person. It's just that simple. All right. Um, all right. Business habits are elaborated along the lines of punctuality, productivity, and quick-wittedness. Right. People need to be punctual, right? Because there is a schedule, there is a work schedule. It's the 9 to 5. You can't be loosey-goosey with being on time. Always be early. If you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. You know. So that's good. That punctuality is extremely important. There's a verse for that. Ecclesiastes 3:2. There's a time to be born and there's a time to die. Well, that doesn't have to do with the work schedule. But there's a time to plant and there's a time to uproot. And as we know, 6 days shall a man work, and on the seventh he shall rest. You're not supposed to work on Sunday, right? So there's a work schedule mixed in there. Although, um, so yes, that's the creation days, but it's also the idea of resting on the seventh day was still there. The idea of productivity, which is taken from the reserve of inward energy and turned into a form of might that is then used to produce, almost like a production worker on an assembly line, produce product that can turn into money over and over, like a mechanical, process. Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Uh, and then the habit of quick-wittedness. Quick-wittedness, having a quick wit, which is useful for making uh, not snap judgments that are not uninformed, not being impulsive, but still having the ability to make good judgments in a short period of time. Um, this is useful in business. Proverbs 8, verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. And as will be demonstrated later on in chapter 15, the way you arrive at that quick-wittedness is by just reading a whole bunch of books on the subject. Just giving time to read a whole bunch of books on the subject, whatever the subject may be, will eventually surface itself in a 1-minute decision that you might need to make down the road. You know, I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. So you have knowledge and good judgment, prudent good judgment in those quick-witted moments because you've read like 10 books on that subject. In other words, for example, making good decisions with stocks. Even the best analyst can make a bad bet on a stock, but that doesn't mean he didn't make a good decision with the information that was available to him. Because the guy's read like 30 books on stocks, right? So, I would have to say, the Gerald Loeb for example, who advises that you should only focus on high-priced New York Stock Exchange stocks. That's a good principle. Of course, there's more to stock analysis than that, but that's a good start. So that does require a quick-wittedness, but you have to arrive at it by degrees, by reading a whole bunch about the subject. You have knowledge and discretion, which then leads to prudence, the ability to make good judgments when they eventually are needed. Self-advertising. This is huge. I agree with this 100%. This is so big. And as a salesperson, I've been in sales for 10 years now. Uh, as a salesperson, I understand the need for self-advertising. I think that a lot of people that don't get into sales, they don't understand how much self-advertising gives you such an array of options. And as a salesperson, I've been able to job hop a whole lot more probably than the average person would, and achieve independence sooner, simply because I understand the power of self-advertisement. And there's freedom in that. Self-advertisement gives you lots and lots of options. Um, if you settle down on a company and you never are secretly advertising outside of it, you're not establishing conversations with other businessmen at all. It limits you, much like a slave stuck in the Confederate South, having no contacts, no connections anywhere else. He can't find a way out because he hasn't made any contacts. One of the reasons why a lot of the slaves, after the Emancipation Proclamation was released, there's this great old movie called The Autobiography of something Pittman. And it's the story of this woman who was a slave, and she stayed in the South. And many people stayed in the South, even after the Civil War. Many of the black slaves stayed in the South, even after the Civil War, because they were afraid of the unknown. Plain and simple. They were afraid of the unknown, and they did not want to travel up to Chicago or New York or go up to the north or anything to try to expand their business horizons. They said to themselves, this is all I've ever known, and they didn't have that risk-taking ability. And so they continued to suffer abuse and racism and segregation and all sorts of things because they just didn't have that grit like the other blacks did to make that travel up. They didn't have that grit. They didn't want to, there was a cowardliness there that kept them there. Whereas the other blacks had the courage to go to the north and be free and try to make a better life for themselves economically. Well, the same thing happens today with employees of companies that never self-advertise. They never do passive job searches, in other words. Um, they don't call up temp agencies. They don't have conversations with people. They don't apply. They're content to stay where they are because they think that that means financial security. And sometimes it just means bondage and lack of freedom and lack of ability to think outside the box. So, uh, self-advertising, I tried to, he talks about newspapers and stuff like that. I think today, the biggest thing for the small business owner, at least, would be to use things like GMass properly. You have to ramp it up properly. And I've talked to the GMass reps. If you don't use it just right, it's not going to work. I've been over and over and with the ringer with GMass, trying to get it just right, and I still am working on it. And I've been doing this for 3 years. It is one of the most perplexing things I've ever tried to get right because Google will shut the thing down sooner or later. And so to get the magic, algorithm of numbers with this thing is perplexing. But currently, the current suggestion with GMass is that you need to get a G Suite account. Then you need to get a guy on Fiverr to hook up Contabo SMTP into the GMass. Then you need to create an email template and have it go into the schedule in GMass and have it send out 50 emails a day as the limit. and do this for 2 weeks. And then after that, increase the amount by 50 every week. And this is a email warming method. And then eventually the idea is that you can get it up to something like 1,500, 1,600, 1,700, or maybe even 1,900 emails a day going out from GMass. This will in turn lead to you getting business opportunities piping into your your email inbox. And this is without having a website, a brick and mortar business sign, or anything. We're talking about money coming into your inbox. We're talking about business customers coming into your email inbox. I mean, automating it, right? So that's useful. Self-advertising is so useful. Um, I think probably putting ads in the paper is probably still a good idea. Indeed is kind of the standard. I recently was between jobs and I went to the Goodwill Job Connection Center. Would you believe that the Goodwill Job Connection Center does nothing other than have you set up a username and password at their computer center to make you use Indeed.com? They have no other additional services. They just have a computer center there for people to use Indeed, which is fine, but it's kind of ridiculous that they have people employed doing that. Anybody can use Indeed, but it does go to show that Indeed is very useful. Indeed is indeed a useful website for job search. Furthermore, Lazy Apply, this new program that I found, lazyapply.com, the unlimited plan, Lazy Apply, still got some bugs, um, but the guy, I mean, is brilliant who made this thing. Lazy Apply, using Lazy Apply to mass apply to jobs on Indeed is such a time saver, such a time saver. Um, and so that's great for self-advertising. And I would also say, although I haven't figured this quite out yet, is self-advertising through WordPress websites. This is a WordPress website. I started wesleygospel.com about 10 years ago or so. And there have been moments where I've gotten, I mean, the normal healthy amount is about 40 views a day on this site. Back when I wrote some stuff, some anti-heretic articles. These seem to always be the biggest ones. Biggest hitters are the anti-heretic, expose the false prophet type articles where you're naming them names. That's dangerous, by the way, because you can get in trouble for defamation. But I wrote this anti-heretic article back in 2017. I was getting like 100 and something views a day for an entire year. And this is WordPress. WordPress can automatically puts your articles onto Google. And so that's really useful. That's a useful self-advertising. If you can use that for business purposes, all the more. Now, I personally don't recommend using Google My Business because a lot of people say, "Oh, use Google My Business. Get yourself a, brick and mortar business and advertise yourself. Get yourself on Google, and then they can find you on Google." Here's the problem with that: democratic voting of people out there that hate you and want to attack your business and put bad reviews in there. That in turn leads to you experiencing a loss of customers. And this has been going on a really long time. Daniel Defoe preached against it. You might say, well, how Google My Business didn't exist in the 1700s. That's true. But Google My Business is still an environment, it's still a situation where democratic gossiping, right, can go on to attack your business. Glassdoor is the same way. So you should do everything in your power to self-advertise while at the same time keeping a low profile. I know that might sound like uh, a conflict of interest or not the same thing, but think about it. Who are the people that want to attack you? Competitors, right? So therefore, when you self-advertise, only um, advertise or get the word out to customers. Avoid getting the word out to competitors. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, the website thing might be kind of a controversial thing in that sense. That's why I think Gmass is better because this allows you to target your email messaging just to potential customers. A website means that both customers and business competitors can see what you're trying to do. Therein lies the problem. They could just start attacking you, pretending that they were a customer that was frustrated, and now you've got these negative comments spreading a negative buzz about your business. So having a billboard or an office is risky because, like I said, it, it's a bullseye that anybody can shoot a gun at. It's a bullseye that anybody can shoot an arrow at that don't like you, or disgruntled customers. Maybe things didn't go well, you know. And so now here they can speak against it on some sort of a review platform, right? That's the problem, right? So I think Google My Business and Glassdoor are things to be avoided. Now sometimes these sites will still force you against your will to be on their site, and you have no choice. Well, then there's nothing you can do about that, other than going to a defamation lawyer and forcing them and pressuring them into a lawsuit, which sometimes people do. Because it affects the customers. It affects it affects their business. And oftentimes this is very unfair. Um, and and but it's something that has to be dealt with. So if you're going to get into self-advertising, try to understand that the objective of it is to get the word out to potential customers only. You do not want to get the word out to competitors or to create a platform where previous customers that you had that hate you can just badmouth your business. And these review platforms are like that. They allow anybody to badmouth you. You can't make improvements along the way. You can't make mistakes, not even tiny mistakes. I mean, suppose you did a bad job on a project. Okay, we all make mistakes. And suppose you want to improve on that and learn from that mistake. Well, these review platforms allow these people to gossip and tear you down, and now you have no way to get past that. So I say keep a low profile in the sense of stay off the review platform. Do not announce to the world your address if you have a small business. Do not allow people to speak against you. Now, if you end up becoming a high profile business, it becomes out of hand. And for example, people who work in Hollywood, they've got paparazzi following them around. They can't control that. Um, but oftentimes the way that they try to control it is be essentially be reclusive, um, which you know is tough. And a lot of people they have difficulties. The higher your profile is, the more you have advertised yourself to people who hate you. Therein lies the problem with self-advertising. It allows you to make money, but it also allows you to become a target of people that don't like you. You have to understand that there's got to be a balance there. So I do think it's wise to keep a low profile so that you don't get attacked and distracted by all these haters. But it's also wise to understand how can I send out mass communications to people that I can make money from? And I would have to say email. Email is probably the smartest way to approach that. Something with GMass, like getting that thing done properly. I would have to say, because that allows you to target people. Um, and I would also have to say a website, because this allows people to find you on Google and contact you through a web form on your. You don't have to have a brick and mortar business. You don't have to have an address. You do not have to have um, Google My Business reviews 4 stars, 5 stars. Um, in fact, I warn against that. I would say get yourself a WordPress website, get the thing jacked up with SEO and get it onto Google so people can find you on there. And then, but do not put yourself on a site like Google My Business where you can get a 3-star, 1-star review and a bunch of negative stuff. Avoid that. The last section that he's talking about is the will and the way. Bulldog determination, perseverance, diligence, hard work, painstaking attention to detail, and just the grind and the drudgery of it all, and just pushing through until finally you get your hit. Finally, you get your success. This is really big. The book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is entirely, the whole book is about this. It's about perseverance at business. Grinding, bulldog determination. I thought there's a little poem the guy quoted on the bulldog determination, which was about the whole phrase bulldog determination comes from a blood sport where they used to sick bulldogs, English bulldogs, after a bull, an actual bull. And the bulldogs would have to jump up, these little tiny dogs would have to jump up and bite the bull ring around its nose and try to pull on that, and they would gang up on the bull to try to pull it down. And people bet on the dogs, like a gambling activity. And this determination that these dogs showed became an illustration in the business world of the type of attitude successful people need to have in business. They need to be like these bulldogs pulling that bull down. Quote on page 237, only crowbars loose the bulldog's grip. Small though he looks, the jaw that never yields drags down the bellowing monarch of the fields. Bull. But only crowbars loose the bulldog's grip. Small though he looks, the jaw that never yields drags down the bellowing monarch of the fields. Bulldog determination says, I am going to latch my jaws onto this bull and I will not let go until it falls down. Now, what is your bull? I think probably the best verses for this have got to be, well, first off, before I jump into Bible verses for bulldog determination, what about self-advertisement? Acts 18, 1-3. See, Paul was a tent maker, right? Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. So now he's in a new city. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and he worked with them. He went around talking about his trade and found some people who did what he did. He self-advertised, found himself a job and room and board. All right, that's self-advertisement. And then also we have 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12. 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12. There's self-advertisement in here as well. Okay. And it says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and you will not be dependent on anybody. You can't win the respect of outsiders if you don't self-advertise your business, right? How will you win their respect if they don't even know you, right? The way they will know you is through self-advertisement. You will walk around saying, I'm a tent maker, I make tents, do you need a tent made for you? I'm a tent maker. Maybe he went on the street corners when he wasn't preaching, announced his tent making abilities. Maybe he wrote a sign about that when people were walking back and forth. I don't know. Okay, bulldog determination and or perseverance at work. Proverbs 10 verse 4, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Diligent hands bring wealth. Romans 5, 3-5, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, and he talks about this a lot. Experiencing sufferings to push through it, strengthening you in your bulldog determination. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So hard work, bulldog determination, perseverance, pushing through the trials and the tribulations with a perseverance attitude. All of these things are necessary for final success in business. You know, you make that $100,000 a year, you make that $150,000 a year, finally, because you kept at it. God bless you out there. This is John with WesleyGospel.com.